Happy New Year, gorgeous, and welcome to the final Flamingo Up episode of 2024. This is a podcast where we help women and everyone rise, reclaim their voice, and take charge of their life and career. I'm Allie, founder of EmpowerHerd, where we empower individuals across the globe to overcome workplace challenges, whether it's toxic environments, covert bullying, or professional burnout, through coaching, community, and connection. As we wrap up 2024 and look forward to a fresh start, I'm thrilled to share that our Reclaim Your Voice coaching program is starting in January 2025. This transformative program is designed to help you rebuild confidence, set boundaries, and thrive in any workplace. I'll share more about that later in the episode, so don't forget to stick around. Now, to close out this year with intention and hope, we're diving into a topic that's foundational for thriving in both life and career: boundaries. I am joined by the incredible De'Nicea Hilton-Harper. For women asking the questions of who is my authentic self or how to be my authentic self, you'll find that the answer is much closer than you think within your whole body self. De'Nicea is a holistic well-being consultant and a doctor of Oriental medicine. She creates playful experiences for women to shift their relationship with their whole body self so they can glean the wisdom and insightful coming from their spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical symptoms, making way for their perfect, authentic self to express itself in all aspects of their life. On The Perfect Playground, De'Nicea shares strategies and tools to create internal and external environments for women to optimize their holistic health with ease and grace so they get to experience rich relationships with self and others just by being their perfect, authentic self. Together, we'll explore how small steps can help you find your voice, set meaningful boundaries, and create space for you to flourish in 2025. So grab a glass of bubbly or your favorite tea and let's flamingo up into the new year, gorgeous. De'Nicea, welcome to Flamingo Up.
Hi, Flamingo Up. What?
I'm loving your energy today. I really am.
Thank
I
you.
love
This is
chatting with you.
so,
We always have a
uh,
fantastic time.
I know, right? So I'm like, oh, this is so good. This is so exciting. And what's such a beautiful idea to like transition into the new year. So yeah, and I'm so thrilled to be taking part of it with you.
I'm so thrilled to have you here. Now, let's just start with something fun, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
So, New Year's Eve
Let's
is
do
all about resolutions. What's one of the quirkiest or most inspiring resolutions you've made?
it. Let's see here. I would say I tried this because it's kind of recent, right? So like because it was for this year, and I was like, maybe it's a word, but I couldn't just get a word. So it's like maybe it's a phrase. So one of the things, and I'm most likely going to carry it on actually into next year, was to have flow within structure.
Hmm.
And yeah, like because it was I could feel coming into this year that I was like really like wanting to hold on to like things don't have to be like A, B, C, D, E. I just want to like chill and flow and go with everything. Um, but then when really looking at like nature and the way that nature moves and kind of communing with it, you realize that like it's actually not as chaotic as it might seem. And like it's just this beautiful orchestration of events that's actually quite structured. And and if anything, I'm in the United States, y'all, and I'm in Florida, and let me tell you, I grew up here and we had some heck of a storms that were coming by our way. And it was like, holy guacamole, what is going on? Because it just hadn't been like this in so many years, you know? So, but I will say one of the things that helped me be able to like kind of tame some of the anxiety and all of that is I just kept kind of relying on the relationship with nature. And it's seeing like even though there are some structures, the structures are built to have that integrity to hold the magic that happens within, right? And even with the structure and going along with the theme of this whole series, it does provide almost like some walls. The walls have windows that you can open. There's some doors that you can open. You know, there's some sliding glass doors too to welcome in and out, but it's still there so that there's this magic that can happen on the inside. And then you can take what you want out and let what you want out, bring whatever you want in, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, like I would probably say that that's going to be my thing going into next year and is the whole flow within structure and inviting myself, sister girl, you know, you could work on this spending plan, like follow it. Your content plan, follow it. Like you can plan up a storm, but your implementation, like so it's like you can still flow, just create your structures and flow with it. So I would say that would probably be like inspiring. It's not as quirky, I don't think, but inspiring to me.
That's actually really, it is quite quirky because if you think we're talking about boundary setting today, and we both have a love-hate relationship with the word boundaries. Uh, because it feels so you feel like you're in a prison, right? There's a boundary you can and can't enter. So what you're talking about though is the structure is the roots and the trunk of the tree, and the flow is the leaves blowing, and your boundaries are like the tree branches. I mean, they crack, they grow, that they expand, they do those sorts of things. So when you talk or bring it
Yeah.
into alignment with boundaries, as long as your values, which are your roots, are solid and your trunk is solid, your boundaries or your branches and they're not,
Yeah.
they're solid, but they also move with the changing breeze or the wind or the weather
Right.
events that we're talking about.
Well, and it's like if you were to take that, right? Because I use that tree metaphor and analogy, the imagery. And it's like if you really go into the tree, it's like it's funny because I think some people think they only think about like the roots just kind of being still for some reason.
Mhm.
But it's like, no, if you actually look at that, they call it a root system for a reason, right? Like, and what's happening is even for myself, it's realizing that it's dynamic. So even us as human beings, it's realizing that whatever we might choose at that time, you can choose something else later, right?
Yeah.
And so I know for myself, like it was just kind of like I think it stems from just growing up. Like a lot of the times you're asked these questions as if like that's supposed to be your end all be all. Like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? As if that's it. Like that's what it's supposed to be, and then you're just supposed to stick with that, right? And then
Yeah.
they try to make sure that that's the only thing that you do. Or in some for some people, they might have had the experiences of, no, you can't do that, and then they end up changing. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that, but it's like with the trees, it's dynamic, and so it's like realizing that even with those roots are growing. So, like, they're growing in length, they might grow in width, they're growing offshoots because why? They're finding their nourishment. Like, and then the thing is, too, is like they're even feeling out like where things are underneath, but at the same time, listening to the same messages that the leaves are sending. So, like, even with the leaves, like you said, like they're following the wind, but they're also following the sun. And then they're sending a message because they're receiving information. It's going through it's like going through the stems, and then it's going into the branches, and then it's going into the actual bark. And then it's like all of that information that's there. And it's all speaking to each other as a whole system, even though each one's individually doing its own role, right? And even if you were to cut it and you see the rings contain information. This is why they can study the rings and tell you what was going on. That's us. Like we are that. Like we have our rings and it's just information, but look and see what other beautiful rings also grew. Then you shift the perspective of this was a past experience. It doesn't necessarily define me. And at the same time, it informed me. And
Mm,
so it informed me. So then now in this present space, I have much more wisdom, much more insight that I still have some liberation in the choices that I make now. Right. And then you're simultaneously being informed by what's in the roots, then what are the leaves also like telling you, right? Like, because that's the air. So the air is up there too, and air is in the ground. So it's kind of like, it's this like I was saying, people kind of think like it's just one thing that's going to be in one spot, but it's like no. And so they're all talking to each other. That whole the whole like mushroom system and the way that they talk to each other like miles and miles away, it's like, oh, that's us. Like that's our energy that we are.
yeah.
And it's kind of like if we can see like it's us and it's our being, we still have like we still influence around us,
Mm,
right? I just asked the question of what type of influence is it that we want to have upon outside of us, right? And like that happens with this. I know that we were talking and I was like, I say boundaries because that's just the word that people have connected to right now. But I really do see it more as a filter. Like, even when we start talking, when we get into talking about the whole body self and like the physical boundaries that are there, they're actually more like filters and very similar to trees and reading information and then just communicating it to other parts of the whole body and then saying, "Oh, you do this, you do that." It's like, oh, this has happened. Alert, alert. So, like, we need to do this. So, it's kind of like they're all talking to each other
yeah.
all at the same time, whether or not we realize it. It's happening.
Talking about linking everything and boundaries back to your whole self, can you share what it means and why it's such a game changer?
Hmm. So, the way that I see it, right? is I'm coming in through this lens of of practicing Eastern medicine, right? And from that perspective, you have the different elements and phases. Most people tend to, if they're even familiar with it, they think like, oh, it's just going to be these elements, right? But they miss a huge part, which is that you're exploring what one element's role is to the whole.
Mm,
And it's vital to understand that because you actually then see just how connected they are to one another. If one is perceiving information, it needs to communicate that to another, or it's it's saying, well, I got to do my job. So I'm going to need y'all to tap in, which, I need that. It's like a factory, right? Like the people who put the stuff together, they don't have nothing to put together unless they get the goods in, right?
yeah.
Like they're all just kind of twiddling their thumbs, like, did this come in from over there? Like, so it's kind of like that. But what happens is when we get the like when the symptoms start showing up or the changes there, like the way that people tend to go about it, the usual reaction is the symptom needs to go away. Right. So then they'll do things to get rid of the symptom, but then may not actually question why it showed up in the first place.
Mm,
And so when you're thinking about like, when it comes to like boundaries, And I hear people saying, like, I gotta set boundaries, I gotta set boundaries. And then they're kind of like what you were alluding earlier, like from those that might have these experiences, and then they start to believe like, oh, I just had these loosey goosey boundaries and everybody took advantage and all of that. I see them on a pendulum, and then all of a sudden the pendulum swings to the other way, and they end up building a fortress. And then in that fortress, because they are setting boundaries, quote unquote, in that fortress, what happened? You start seeing body pain,
Yeah.
right? You start seeing constipation pop up. You start seeing joint stiffness. You start seeing headaches, but the headaches are coming with such like muscular spasms and tensions, right? What I'm describing to you are ways that the body literally is responding and building more stuff like that's still like the fortress or the gate. You're
Yeah.
building the shell, and it ain't a soft shell turtle. It's you building that hard back tortoise shell, right? Because you are trying to protect yourself. So then the body is going to morph and change so that things are not going to move as fluidly or as flexible,
Mm.
which means things are going to start slowing down. Things are going to start to hurt because they aren't able to move and flex as well, right? So then when your people are experiencing this, there is an element, some people would say, like, oh, that's the fight or flight, freeze or fawn response when they're in these workplaces. And it's like, yes. And what's their response to that? Is that they're building up this, like, this fortress, like I said, on that other end of that pendulum swing. And, and so then with that, it's like, sometimes relate. And so now that's the body relationship. But now let's talk about like the social relationship. What now? What's happening at that gate? It's like, nope, people shut off. like so it's nope, I don't trust, anyone, anything what they have to say. And the way that you could bring this back into the body is that sometimes that's when they'll start experiencing anxiety and palpitations and whatnot, right? And one of the organ systems that's related to our opening and closing our almost heart gate
Mm.
is the pericardium. Sure, it surrounds the heart. It's that layer. It's a thin layer right around the heart, right? But that aspect of who we let in and then who we open ourselves up to is under that control. And imagine, like I said, that protection, they'll go hard and strengthen. So imagine you have this shell outside of that heart that's like, it strengthen. And what do you hear when people talk when they talk about people, they'll be like, oh, their heart is cold as ice.
Yeah.
So in cold constricts. They don't have the warmth flowing through. And it could simply be just out of response of what had been going on. And then they're setting boundaries and the body's responding. Right. So like when I think about people that would have experienced things in the workplace, I experienced it. And like, like I learned later on through studying what was happening. Like what had happened with my body. I didn't even connect it together, right? Like it wasn't until studying through this lens where I'm like, oh, holy guacamole. Like it's just like that, like it was like everything just kind of like connected, and then it was like light bulbs, like all lighting like a big
The
old Christmas
aha
tree.
moment.
So, yes. And so it's like, holy guacamole. If that is what I can offer for people who who have felt infringed upon, felt violated, right, by what had happened, and then to just shift the perspective somewhere, it's like you realize that you still have power, and then you're in this process of reclaiming more and more of the power, and where it might feel like you may be alone. There might be, you don't know where to turn.
Mm.
It's like trust the body that it'll guide you, right? So when you're wondering like what I need to set boundaries. I know I need to do something. And it's cool. Like it's cool. That's a part of our whole system. Like the ego's role is safety. Like that's one of its big things is safety. So it's only natural that you're going to be thinking about safety.
Yeah.
And but what I'm asking is for you to go in intentionally and then seeing what form and in what way was I influenced by this experience. And then that'll guide you based on where it shows up in the body as to what direction to take, what choices to put in place where the body still feels like, okay, we can still be flexible, we can still move, we can still allow the blood to move, our heart's still warm, we can still have relationships like with other people, with ourselves, like all of that jazz is totally possible.
Yeah.
We're just using where it shows up and how it shows up in the body to guide just what does that really mean for you.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Oh, you've covered off for my. I had a question for you, and I was getting ready to ask, and you just like, woo, you even
Oh,
answered it for me. So my question to you was, what's one small thing someone could do, and it's literally sit with yourself and feel with it. Think about that experience that you just had at work. How does it make you feel? Where is it showing up in your body of that feeling, and
mhm.
what's it telling you that you need to filter using
Yeah.
your world to filter. So basically, I my it's showing, for example, it's showing up in my throat. So is that constricting you from speaking? Is your voice being not heard? Are you being told you're too loud? From one extreme to the other. Through that
Mhm.
filter, what can I change? Because I can only change me. I can't change those around me. So what in me needs to, what do I need to address within me to help me see that filter through
Yeah,
differently? Would that be
definitely.
would that be
Yeah, you
right?
got it spot on. And then I'm gonna layer onto that too.
Absolutely. I love layering.
Um, like, let's do it. So like, I would layer onto that and like, and I say this with a lot of love to all of my super duper introverts and super duper sleuths out there who are like, I gotta figure this out because what happens is we can get stuck in that. I'm gonna figure this out. And what does this really mean? So
Mm,
they will literally just kind of be percolating and percolating, ruminating and ruminating. And actually, that in and of itself is a whole nother message for you. So what I would ask you to do is even as Allie suggested, it's taking the pause. So like the physical body might take the pause of like just don't move, like and you kind of sit there, but then your body might move. And it's the movement on its own. So there's a little subtle difference, by the way. Just like if it's moving on its own, it's processing information. So allow it to move and just take note of where it's moving. And so that can happen. Like for some people, it just might be like this shaking in the hands like this, or
mm,
their foot might start tapping, or their knees just kind of like jumping, or you might start feeling some shivers, kind of like, and that's all a part of the somatic processing. So you're just taking note of where it's at. So with that, it's understanding that like it's kind of like it's this being aware of the sensation, but allowing it to move. Some people, when they get stuck in that rumination and wanting to know what it means, I feel like they're actually still holding on to it. So whatever that emotion is, and however else it was that they responded to it, because they haven't logically figured it out yet, it's almost like an invitation to keep it in the body because you're still trying to figure it out. So what I'm asking is, It's such a delicate dance and very delicate balance. If you think about the flamingos and they kind of like do this thing, a little thing, it's kind of like that. So kind of like imagine you're like this flamingo, like I'm just gonna kind of like dance a little bit, and just kind of just lightly. It's like it's an observance. It's in that observance, and that's simply what it is. It's just we're bringing that awareness while also seeing that it's like wrapped and cocooned and that it may exit. We're allowing it to exit. Sometimes the logical aspects are actually slower. This is why we can feel the body stuff and it doesn't make sense yet because the mind hasn't caught up yet. So if you know that, then you'll be able to offer yourself the time, the chronos time space that sometimes the answer may not be as logically clear,
Yeah.
but you're still allowing the body to go ahead and to process it. And you're simply being aware and realizing like you don't have to ruminate. You don't have to keep like over and over replaying it in your head or anything like that. It's just simply being present and allowing it to happen. And so it's and if you're with someone that's that might be like they're somatic practitioners and whatnot. I look at it through my lens of what comes up in the body and everything, so I connect it in that way. So like when you are making those observations, let's just say you're working with somebody, but it's in between sessions, it's just taking note of it. You don't even have to just take the note, bring it back up to your next session, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then but you don't have to hold on to it. So I just want to make sure that people know that, like, to observe doesn't mean you have to hold on. It's kind of like the little kid that would be outside and they'll see like the little butterfly and they'll be like, but I want to take it home, mommy. I want to take it home. And then it's like, baby, you can actually really appreciate this butterfly and its environment. You don't have to take it home, right?
Mm.
It can just simply be, and you can simply just be present with it. And then in that presence, like what goodness, what juiciness can come out of it. And then just next.
I have an interesting question for you because I was listening to you. So, giving yourself permission to feel whatever it is that you're feeling without understanding, what it is at this point in time
It's tricky.
is actually a fluid boundary, though.
It is.
So,
Yep.
for the people, the introverts and the sloths, or people like me who are overthinkers or have been overthinkers in the past,
I know
I know you can see me. Maybe for 2025, your only boundary is just allow myself permission to feel
y'all.
without answers and
Feel and
practice
flow.
that and just feel the flow.
Yeah.
Because not no one in this world has all the answers to everything in life.
Nope.
So a great way for people who are experiencing workplace bullying is just to feel it. Don't explain you don't need to explain it. You just need to give yourself permission to feel, to start the healing process.
Yep.
I
And
love that.
it's just feel it's paradoxical. I know. I know it's paradoxical.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when a lot of us think that we have to do something, to and that's where I ask people to consider, what do you mean by doing something? Because I'm going to tell you, you were witnessing me and Allie doing something and we aren't even thinking about it. And that's breathing, that's blinking,
Mm.
right? Like we didn't have to do quote unquote anything, but our bodies naturally knew what to do. And so that's a part of that, creating that rich relationship that I was talking about. That's an element of it, is that trusting that the body it's in response. And so a part of developing that type of relationship with your whole body self is to remove the judgment of the sensation. It's simply a sensation. And then we're just gonna sit with it and become aware, right?
Yeah.
And how like that whole meaning of what's behind it, it comes. Like you'll begin, it's like the more you get into it, the more you actually realize like, wow, my body like inherently knew what to do, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like this, you start to appreciate it in a different way, and especially for those that might be the type of bullying they may have experienced might have something to do with their looks. And because that's often like low hanging fruit to use against people. So that like to kind of see that you can shape this relationship with yourself and with your body in a different way. Because that trusting it and it trusting that it's sending those messages to you, and then for your spirit to just kind of know, this is it. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's the empowerment for yourself. Like that's to me, that's where you really do um reclaim your power.
Yeah.
It's being there and just realizing like, yeah, this is my body, this is my vessel, and it's on my side. It's just having a heck of a time communicating it, but it's there. It's there.
Oh, it is. I do have a, we're talking about workplace bullying. So here's my question, because I did this. How how can someone navigate the guilt that they have when they've set boundaries and yet still stand firm using their whole body self to guide them to do that?
So those observations that you made of those sensations, I bet you they were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so therefore, whenever you're in when you're in those experiences with those other people, the only person who's going to feel that discomfort is you. So whenever that inkling of a guilt might come up, you can actually start to think, how the heck did I feel when I didn't like implement and keep that declaration to myself, aka boundary,
Mm,
because they're not going to feel it. You are. And so that is something that I really look at. Like when I know, like I know I would have said, I'm gonna do this, like and and then I'll be tested.
yeah.
And sometimes I would have some bodily sensation first before the actual experience even happens. Because I remember that it's gonna happen quick. Like you can just have this thought and the body's gonna respond as if it's happening right then and there. But it hasn't Chronos time yet. But the body's gonna respond. And then that's when I'll realize like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit of the guilt that's coming up because of this. And then I said, but it's interesting. Like, where is that coming from? Like, if I'm feeling guilty, like, what is it? Because oftentimes guilt is the Resentment comes out of overdoing something, right? Guilt
Yeah.
is when you're feeling like you're doing less than what you think you ought to be doing. So if you're feeling like I'm doing less than what I feel like I ought to be doing, it's like according that's when you can start having that conversation and exploration with yourself. According to whom,
Mm.
right? So we can take something like, let's just say that you are experiencing the workplace bullying type that is the whole like subliminal, we're going to keep you here later, right? Like or you're doing more work than other people on a team, right? Something like that. And now imagine though that you grew up or had this belief that there was a lot of hard work that you had to do to prove that you could be there, to
Yeah.
prove that you were worthy of that position or whatever it is, right? So think about it. The guilt, like I said, opposite of resentment. Resentment is doing more than what you really thought you needed to do. Guilt is less than. So the guilt can easily be activated because it in a way it is you trying to say like no, I don't have to do all of that, but it kind of like it's until the system catches up, it still thinks, oh, you're not doing as much as you're supposed to be
Mm.
doing because as growing up that's not you like really doing your job, but you realize like you're being taken advantage of, you realize that you're being pushed, you're antagonized, like, right? So like all of that is there, so you have this conflict that's kind of happening. And in that conflict, the bodily sensations will pop up,
Yeah.
right? So we already talked about like with the guilt, there can be some anxiety. For some, it shows up as depression. For some, it shows up as palpitations. It might be sweating. It might even be digestive. It could be a constipation or it could be opposite. Like some get nauseous. Like those are all different ways, and each one has a different nuance to how this guilt is showing up.
Yep.
But what
Yeah.
I can tell you is overall, it's uncomfortable. And so then to go into your question, would you want to experience that? Or would you want to call on a friend if you have to be that like sturdy, like rock for a minute?
Mm.
And then just to kind of be like, no, you said this, you can do it. Right. And then just realize it's going to feel like a huge, 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 huge mountain. Right. It's going to feel so big. Because you're shaking up what someone else is used to. They're used to being able to do this, right? And they're
Yeah.
used to a certain response from you. And then when you get to that point where you're like, not anymore, I'll introduce another way that I'll respond to you. I'm about to introduce a different type of dynamic in this relationship.
Yeah.
And so with that, you've become a threat.
Mm.
You have literally become a threat. So where some might feel smaller, lesser, shrunk down, when you say and you change something else in that dynamic, it's already the power thing has already shifted and you've become a threat because you removed what they thought they had to be able to have power.
Yeah.
You have literally disconnected the power cord. So that means that they're scared. They have to now, they're wobbling, trying to figure out like what's going to happen now. What do I got to do? What do I got to do to try to maintain the status quo? Right.
Yeah.
So just as much as that is in our heads and in our whole system of like, oh, we're doing something new. It's shaky, shaky status quo. Like, should I do this? I know I said I'm going to do this, but I feel guilty. So I'm not going to, but then I want to. And then like, so the same thing that's happening within you is about to also happen outside of you with the other.
Yeah.
It's mirrored. So when you see it outside of you, you can see it clearly and greatly because it's happening inside of you. It's familiar. When you realize that it's familiar, it's not anything new. It's familiar. That's the reason why you can see it so easily outside of you, and just know that it's happening inside of you. And then allow all of the murkiness to happen. Through all of the murk, there is still life. That's where these beautiful lotus blooms come in, right? It's just us realizing like we're just in the murk and we're shaking some shit up. Like, so that's, oh, I'm sorry, you may have to mark that explicit, huh? Like, it's,
I think it's
unless you,
allowed.
unless you want to edit it out. I'm sorry. I don't even know what I said to repeat it so it can be
Oh,
edited out. Like, so
no,
like,
it's all good. I love it. It's natural. It's authentic. I mean, we are at New Year's Eve and we're talking about setting boundaries. I mean, you know.
but it's, I just wanted to like really convey that and like encourage, encourage as scary as it is. And yes, the guilt that may definitely pop up. And it's still an invitation to realize that that guilt is not just showing up in the workplace with this particular event. Guaranteed is happening in other areas of your life. And
Mm,
perhaps the reason why you're willing to take it on with this particular workplace environment is because it seems like it's the easiest. It's usually the other ones that are very difficult, and yet they all look the same. But the one in this case looks like it's easiest to change. And I'm going to tell you, just like how the body responds if we were to like introduce an intervention with the body, and like we're saying, well, we're gonna actually work with this. We're gonna actually like let's work with the chi of the liver, and we'll get that resolved. Remember I said in the very beginning, every single aspect is connected.
yep.
You're only influencing one, and that's going to ripple out into the other ones, right? So even if this one you find is the easiest, because this one's the one that's getting to you the most, right? In It feels like it's the easiest. I know it sounds crazy. It might sound a little bit nuts, like that. Oh, what does she mean? That's what I'm dealing with, you know? But when you see that it's mirrored in other elements and other aspects, that theme is there in other places of your life, this one really might seem like it is the easiest. And that is the reason why you're willing to do something. And even when you do something with this one, just like how we worked with the liver's chi and it affected all the other elements and phases, this one in particular thing in the workplace is about to have a ripple effect in the other areas of which it mirrors.
Yeah.
So it's all going to be great, right? It's all going to be great, big, huge. And it just takes that little step. And if you need some support in that, like for that person, like somebody that's there that knows what your core desires are, that you trust, and that you know that if you are feeling shaky, they're that person that's going to be like, that's going to be stable, right? When you feel like you can't be stable, there you have that, like in the form of you as a coach or other people as consultants. Like when you have that, like you'll realize like they're right there with you as you go through this. Like I said, you just shaking stuff up and then things are going to settle.
Yeah.
So and then you'll realize this is just a blip in time, even though it seems like it's 30 years. And then you'll look back and be like, dang, what? It was only 15 minutes. I was feeling like that. Like, you know, but you did it. Right? You
Yeah.
did it. That guilt went away. And it's like, oh, I'm good. I'm good.
I love that. And I think as we head into the new year as well, it's, I've been in those shoes. I've, set those really rigid boundaries, went from one extreme to the other, as you said, set those really rigid boundaries, felt all the body stuff happening. The workplace bullying brought the feelings to light. I didn't know what to do with them, set really rigid boundaries, and then and it didn't help, right? Then felt guilt because I couldn't like protect myself from what was going on. And then started to silently lose my voice, to stop standing up for myself, those sorts of things. And it was a small shift. It wasn't a big shift, right? It was just a small, the first realization that I am being bullied was like a huge shift for me to then have a different set of boundaries. Okay, so I am being bullied. What do I no longer accept from feeling
Mhm.
like that? What can I personally change? So then that became the whole, what we're now calling, instead of the word boundaries, the filters I started using is what can I change within me so that doesn't happen again, or I don't feel like that again. And then
Yeah.
those small fluid boundaries of myself, how I was going to show up for myself, what I was going to do for myself, how was when I got into those moments of guilt, how would I release them? So for me, it was taking a mental health break every lunchtime and going for a 45-minute walk to release not just the pressure of, the constant bullying that was happening, to also reset myself and to reset
Mhm.
my filters and how I wanted to feel.
Yeah.
So then showing up in that, whole body way without realizing I was actually doing that.
Isn't that the coolest part?
I know. It's like I'm learning so many things about my journey from so many different people. I'm like, I did that without, and I didn't even know I was doing that. It was just my process.
Mhm. That's a part of that. Like I was saying, it's that doing that you don't realize that you're doing, and it's a part of that. The body is going to actually kind of guide you.
Mm,
And, you know, um, I've had some describe to me like things that they're craving because oftentimes like we're looking at food therapies and stuff too, and then I'm like, yeah, what are you craving? Like they're talking about like what they've been eating a lot of and what their aversions are and everything. And when they might judge it at first because of the quote unquote good foods, the health foods, all of that jazz. And like, um, when I hear what it is, and then I know the energetics of them, and then I'm like, oh, this is what you're doing. Like you're actually self remedying. And they're like, what? And then I once it can paint it out for them, like, well, yeah, these are the energies of the root vegetables, and then the fruits have these type of energies, and then layering in that this is the season that we're in right now. Like you're actually self remedying, and you're intuitively responding.
yeah.
And it's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, that, you're doing it. Like you're doing it already. And then you can act like we can just ask, like, okay, cool, I am. It's that here I have one right here for my little Zen stacking stones. It's just the one pebble. And you can just drop it there and it'll just create this ripple effect in all these other areas. But awareness is the first thing. And I think like I want to say acceptance is the next. And for some, that might be difficult. And I feel like if the difficulty comes from uh, this mix of thinking that if there's acceptance, that there's agreement, and they're not the same.
No.
So if you become aware and then you can accept that that's there, then it's like, all right, then right there, you're at the crossroads. Now you can choose. It's no longer this passive going along with that response. It's this like, I'm choosing now what we're about to do. And acceptance does not equal agreement. You may have been in agreement subconsciously as the whole thing was happening for whatever reason. But then out of that, you're like, all right, well, I no longer agree with that. So what am I going to create now?
I think it's acceptance of who you want to be and where you want to go.
Oh, most definitely.
So it's not acceptance. So, I didn't accept that I was a victim. I accepted that I was going to be a victor and then went down a different path.
Hmm.
So you are at those crossroads. You do have a choice. You can either continue to allow yourself to be a victim, which means you're still allowing the power to be removed from you, or you can choose to be a victor, which means you're taking the power back.
Yeah,
And they're two different life choices to make.
for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Oh,
So happy for you, by the way.
I'm loving this conversation. I think it's gold. I think a lot of people are also going to ask now for your root vegetable energy lists.
Man, our foods have so much to offer us. And this is like me speaking for to myself too, right? So like, because I'm walking this earth too. And just where I'm at, and we already I already learned the difference compared to where you're at and like where I'm at. And I'm all like, oh, people get that catered. And you're like, no, this you cook it here, kind of. And I'm like, touche. So like so and it's just like I would explore that a lot for myself to try to find different things that I can root myself in
Mm,
to keep me connected and grounded to foods in the way like the energetics of the foods and like finding my I used to love and have so much peace like in cooking,
yeah.
right? And so like there are some things that in my life I've just kind of let just kind of like fly and then but then realizing like might have succumbed to some marketing. And so but I mean that's just what happened here is like that's how a lot of the industry had changed was to paint the picture that it was inconvenient to cook. No, you want to focus on work, don't you? So that means that you can't cook anymore. Like, and so we're gonna make it easier for you. And even finding myself like attracted to like all these meals that you can get delivered home, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that looks real enticing. But I to myself like within that whole flow within structure, there was also another one like synchronicity and simplicity, and so it's like, I might have to just kind of going in thinking about for next year those because that is even a form of a filter, right? And as you were talking, I'm like imagining the water filters, the coffee filters, the oil filters. They're all filters, but guess what? They all needed maintenance, and that filter has to be changed,
Yeah.
right? And so that is the case, like when it comes to like to the foods, to our choices of movement, to if there's meditation or breath work or any of the other tools, they're a part of your maintenance of the filter. The filter already exists. When we're looking at the body, the way that these filters are there, the digestive tract all along, it's there. Our eyes have filters, right? Like our
Mm.
skin in and of itself is a filter. And so it's like all of that needs that maintaining. And we're simply looking at, and they're sending their messages. It's just like check engine light and then like or a little maintenance light and it's just telling us information. And then while it's processing, because we're just simply aware and just being with it, and then it's us asking, like, yeah, like, what's that choice?
Mm.
Who am I in this situation? And who do I want to be? And then what do I put in place for who I want to be to actually express itself in the physical form? So it's like, yeah, that was a lot. That was a kind of big old picture that came in my head. Like,
Oh gosh, I love it. So just I'm going to ask you a final question, if that's okay with you.
Hmm.
What's your hope for our listeners in reclaiming their voices through boundaries for 2025? What's one thing?
So this was not what I was expecting to come to me, by the way, but it came in very loud and clear. Is that one? It's to explore basically volume, your the meaning you have attached to volume. So even in reclaiming your power and your voice, doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be loud to be powerful.
Mm,
If that comes up, that's actually an invitation to explore then where that might have come from. And so don't it's like don't get it twisted and don't think that just because you're quiet, there is no power there.
yeah,
So sometimes those things that run very quietly, but the motor is still going, are usually the ones that can last the longest.
I love that.
I'm just saying. As long as those great big engines take a lot of juice and they don't last long. And
Yeah,
so when you're in those places and in those environments, and let's just say that they're loud, that loudness does not equal power. And you can definitely change things for yourself and let them mistake the quietness. But you still have actually reclaimed your voice and
I
your
love that.
unique patterning of voice, actually.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love I love having conversations with you. We kind of just sit there and chatter for ages. So, and I love the uniqueness that you bring, and I love that you bring stuff up even for me that I would never have thought about.
Mm.
And I now have a different filter from, our interactions and from speaking with you today. My boundaries, you've actually taught me not to have rigid boundaries, right? You've inspired me to have more fluid boundaries, more, be more like a branch on a tree instead of, the trunk of the tree.
Yeah. You could be
Listen
all
to,
of the tree.
I could be all of the tree. Listen to my body, and my body will guide me as to where I need to set boundaries.
Mm.
That they don't need to be the cement wall boundary. It can just be a set of palm trees.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be that full concrete wall. And I love that. I hope everyone gets that message that your boundary setting, we always go, oh, my boundaries, I'm going to lose weight. What's my boundary setting around that is I'm not going to eat takeout. And
Mm.
you're setting your expectations. A big one for me is always replace expectation with appreciation. Appreciate that takeout because you're not going to have it very often, but you don't limit yourself. Don't build the cement wall which says, I'm not going to do this.
Yep. Yeah.
Your boundary is, I'm going to have it twice a month.
Yeah. And even as you're enjoying it, if you're present, so this is like another exercise that I do
Mm,
for myself when I encourage others, is even when you do to get that takeout, if you're actually really present with the meal, meaning that you're chewing very thoroughly, you're showing that appreciation to not just the meal, but how it got there, right? Like that from the chefs to the delivery drivers to the animal, if it is an animal, to the plant, to the water, to the earth, all of it that's involved. And you slow down, you actually can realize that sometimes you don't even eat the whole thing. So, but you got to enjoy it
Yeah.
at the same time. So it's like even that in and of itself is a way. And if you think about filters, I mean, the filters, like the things that come into I mean, what are those filters? They're different sizes and stuff because they're like the holes are going to be a little bit bigger. Some of them are a little bit more finer. Like some things go through slower, some things go through faster. And so it's kind of like you're just kind of like taking it in and you're slowing down the intake so that the filter can actually, it'll just filter on through. Right. And then biomedically, like biologically, you really are actually allowing the esophagus to do its thing, the stomach acid to prepare itself to receive, and then being able to prep it to go into the small intestine. But the gallbladder and the liver are also given the time to produce their enzymes and what their role is into the digestive tract. And like, is that gateway clear? Like, all of that stuff happens all simultaneously. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, have the takeaway. Just take your time with it and appreciate it. And like, it's like, that was so good. You got me thinking about barbecue, by the way. But like,
Sorry about that.
now I'm like, what time is it? Is anything open right
Well, it is New Year's Eve. I'm sure everything's open right now.
I hope so. Like,
Oh my gosh. Thank you for joining me today for the final Flamingo episode of 2024, De'Nicea. You were sharing incredible insights on boundaries, which we now have retagged as filters, and how listening to our whole body self can guide us in setting the ones we need the most. Denisia's wisdom is the perfect reminder as we step into the new year that boundaries are an act of self-care and a pathway to the life you deserve. As we close out this year and you step boldly into 2025, remember you have the power to rise, reclaim your voice, and thrive. Flamingo Up means standing tall, owning your space, and facing life's challenges with strength and grace, just like a flamingo. Oh my gosh, I think I'm ready for champagne. And speaking of thriving, I'm thrilled to announce that the Reclaim Your Voice program is commencing in January 2025. As I said, the transformative 12-session program is here to help you recognize and address toxic workplace dynamics, rebuild your confidence and self-worth, set and maintain boundaries that protect your energy, develop emotional resilience and leadership skills, and advocate for yourself and others, creating healthier workplace cultures. If you're ready to reclaim your power and make 2025 your year of transformation, don't wait. Spots are limited, so reach out today to secure your place. I cannot wait to support you on this journey. If today's episode has resonated with you, I'd love to invite you to our Be Heard community. It's an intimate group where I offer live coaching every Wednesday to help you deepen these insights and take actionable steps towards your goals. You can find the link to request an invite in the show notes. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss an episode. Next week, we're kicking off the new year with an episode titled Moving Forward, Starting the Healing Process After Workplace Hurt. We'll explore what it takes to begin your healing journey with insights and practical steps to help rebuild your confidence, clarity, and hope. Wishing you light, love, and plenty of flamingo spirit as you step into this new and exciting year. Keep flamingoing gorgeous. I will be your sparkle sidekick, and I will see you in 2025.